I listen to so many people I disagree with so that I can have a clear understanding either of that I'm wrong or I'm right, but now I have greater clarity because I understand their position better.
We say things here, we believe things now, but we are always evolving and growing and developing our opinions, our thoughts, and our ideas, and we invite you into that process with us.
All of us need people in our lives that they listen to us. They hear the inner narrative that's leaking out, and then they challenge it and go, no, that's your struggle, that's not your identity.
You're listening to the Mindshift Podcast. My name is Erwin McManus, and I'm here with my dad, Erwin McManus. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I love that we have a little bit of sunshine, and but that was in Miami. LA feels cold and a little dreary, a little Seattle-like.
Okay, so a couple of things about that. I got kicked off an American Airlines flight. We were supposed to fly back from Miami together. I got kicked off the plane. Well, I didn't even make it on the plane. I scanned my boarding pass, and then something happened, and then basically we'll talk about it another day, and maybe we'll keep it behind the
It was crazy. They almost kicked me off. There passengers complaining about how
they treated me and
treating us.
Yeah.
And it is as close as I ever felt like to it being in the middle of an airplane riot.
It was very bizarre because, at one point, we'll talk about this more in the Mindshift community, and not to like bait you guys, but I think I want to be a little bit more unfiltered and candid about my personal opinions. And I think that would be better, more well taken care of in the Mindshift community behind the paywall. So here's an unobliterated ad. Is it unobliterated?
No.
Why did I say unadulterated? What's unobliterated? Okay,
no,
George
unadulterated.
Washington.
Go ahead.
Not George Washington, George W. Bush. I'm so tired. My goodness, I cannot believe I just quoted the first president.
I don't think we should edit this. I think we should.
No, okay, guys. So, full transparency, this is our second attempt at an episode because we did about 55 minutes earlier today, and we decided that it was too controversial and that we hit too many topics like Amelia Perez and the Oscars, the Grammys, Beyonce, trans, racism.
Wait a minute, no. We're not going to bring all that up. That's why we're...
Well, no, I'm going to advertise the episode that's behind the Mindshift community.
All right.
So all of that stuff is behind the paywall at Mindshift community. And guys, if you're wondering, like, okay, these guys are building this community, why are they, teasing us? The reality is that we have done this for years where we've just recorded episodes that we've just thrown away because maybe they were too hot to live on the internet.
And because of my own posture in culture, because whenever I talk about something really interesting to me or I think is really poignant or controversial, I'll always get this feedback. I would say maybe even hate. I thought he was a pastor, or pastors shouldn't be talking about this. They always want to use that pastor card. And I'm actually really cognizant and very sensitive to trying to always be aware that what I say can affect people who are searching for God and trying to find a relationship with Jesus. And it's really important to me. But I also am a philosopher and a cultural anthropologist and a student of society and humanity. And these things matter to me. And I'm 66 years old, and I want to talk about the things I want to talk about. And this community is a way of doing that because you have to decide to pay to be in the community. So you can't get offended by the conversation there because we're saying up front, this is going to be an offensive conversation. This is going to be a confrontive conversation. This is going to be, a holds bar, whatever it is,
holds bar,
conversation. And so it's my way of trying to be respectful of the broader community and responsible to some of the relationships I have as the founder of Mosaic, and also what I feel is my calling and intention in life to help people think better and talk about all the important issues in life.
There's a unique contrast between your influence and effectiveness and your investment in the Mosaic and the spiritual community in church, right? And I think a lot of people, it's easy to blur the lines. I get how people get confused and go, I can't believe you said that as a pastor.
Right.
But the reality is that, and it's hard, right? Because people of faith, I think we both have unique faiths, right? And you never take that hat off, but sometimes you do take a pastor hat off and go, hey, look, I'm not looking at this through the lens of being a pastor. I'm looking at this through the lens of just being human. And I think there's a great clip from Joe Rogan that says, I'm not a liberal. I'm not a conservative. I see great things on both sides. I'm just a human, and I'm here to just have a human conversation. And this time I actually, went with this candidate, or I went with this thing. So this isn't mitigating our opinion or filtering ourselves, but I think it's just us trying to be wise.
Yeah. It's also the difference between I am always a follower of Jesus.
Yes.
I am not always a pastor. I am also an artist and a designer and a futurist and an entrepreneur and a filmmaker and
graphic novelist.
A novelist and a human. And when people try to put that hat on you 24/7, what they're really trying to do is they're trying to put a muzzle on your mouth and a sensor on your brain, which I always resist violently.
It's that old quote that someone said about LeBron, like, I wish he would just shut up and dribble.
That's what I feel like people say to me. I wish he would just shut up and dribble. That I feel that all the time.
And by no means am I comparing myself to LeBron, but there's a human comparison there that we just want people to be what we want them to be. And we don't want them to have thoughts or opinions or ideas or sins or, good and bad. And I think the reality is that, we're human and we're allowed to have these things. And that's the ethos of this podcast is also, if you're new to this podcast or you're seeing these clips, they're clips for a reason. They're to hook you into the overall episode, but we live in a society, a cultural world where clips tend to be the only thing we engage with. Yeah. We don't actually engage in the larger conversation. And we talk about that on this app. So we have 175 members in the Mindshift community. They're getting a lot of content this month because I'm going to tell them how I got kicked off the American Airlines flight. And we talked a lot about a lot of really dynamic issues. We throw out some opinions. We throw out some of our feelings. But really, if you've taken the 7 frequencies assessment, that's a part of the book. You can go to 7frequencies.com. It's great. It's amazing. It's fun to have to do with teams as well as like loved ones and relationships. But we talk about the professor frequency. Yeah. And very rarely do you put on the professor hat where you basically speak from the position of you being an expert. You'll do it behind the scenes because it's a tone and a frequency you don't often feel that you need to operate in. And I always beg you to tell people what to do because you actually know you have great opinions, you have great thoughts. So, a part of this art form and this offering of this podcast for us is that this is a place where we can have those, mental Olympics, those conversations. But we early on in Battle Ready, during COVID, when we first started talking about politics, we would say this phrase: "We reserve the right to change our minds." Yeah, and we still stand by that. We say things here, we believe things now, but we are always evolving and growing and developing our opinions, our thoughts, and our ideas, and we invite you into that process with us. So many times do we get off this happened 2 hours ago when we filmed the first episode. We turned the cameras off and we started talking with our team, and Jacob mentioned that hey, he gave in some input on some of the things we said, and he wanted to protect us and make sure hey, it's gonna be hard to not clip some of the controversial moments. Are you guys prepared for that?
You want this spreadsheet right now?
Yeah. And I think it was it's a wise perspective and it's an interesting perspective, but we're not just sitting out here going we want to cause controversy. We do want to talk about controversial topics, but that's not the sole goal, right? Yeah.
I want to tell the truth. And so when I hear people say a pastor shouldn't be talking about that, what we're actually saying is a pastor shouldn't tell the truth. And but I also want to give my perspective. And perspective is different than truth. You always want to root your perspective in truth, but you have to realize that perspective is truth being filtered through your experience, your understanding, your insight. And what I think is fascinating sometimes is people will listen to me for 20 years and they just happen to always agree with me. Then the moment I say something that they disagree with, they say, I'm never going to follow you again, never going to listen to you again. And I think, is this the level of high thought that you're capable of? That the moment someone disagrees with you, you stop listening to them. Because if you've been listening to me for 10 years or 20 years and you found to be really valuable, you're actually going, oh, there's wisdom here. And then the moment I disagree with you, you try to invalidate the wisdom rather than going, wait a minute, this is someone I've trusted and respected. Maybe I should listen. Maybe I should consider the perspective he's bringing. I don't have to agree with it, but I should at least be able to process it. I listen to so many people I disagree with, and I actually love listening to people who have incredible intelligence, incredible insight, who I disagree 100%, so that I can have a clear understanding either of that I'm wrong and I need to change my mind, or I'm right, but now I have greater clarity because I understand their position better.
One thing that bothers me about the controversy around the clips that we posted from 2 episodes ago, right? Because the last episode we had my amazing mother, your amazing wife, and that was such a gift. And honestly,
we're getting a lot of love.
And honestly, it was a great palate cleanser, because how can you not engage in that story?
How you cannot love Kim McManus?
Kim McManus is, well, I can tell you how you do not love Kim McManus, because my mom is because we talked about in the pod, we all laughed about like how early she wakes up, but I have some friends staying at my house right now from Sweden who I love.
So you made the great mistake of staying at our house.
I just thought, it'd be nice to just crash with the parents and
I tried to
stay
warn
for
you
a couple nights, and I honestly thought I'd be out of town a little bit longer, so I'm staying. And you did try to warn me, but Mom gets up at 3:30 in the morning, and I brought my dog,
and she's loud,
and she doesn't follow the rules.
No,
so that she let the dog out. And who let the dog out was Kim McManus.
She follows no rules except her own.
No rules. She's an anarchist.
Oh, 100%.
I love
100%.
that woman. But that woman at 3:30 in the morning, I wake up to yapping, right? To just, my dog's a puppy, just yapping.
Took him out of the...
Takes him out of the crate. Wakes him up middle of the night.
He's yapping away, but she doesn't mind because she's yapping away too.
Yes,
talking to her sister in North Carolina.
I'm stressing because I'm like, Spoon never wakes up like that in the middle of the night. Spoon,
unless he's awakened.
Unless he's awakened. So the thing with that dog is, what I've loved is, since literally day one, that dog has woken me up one time. That one time was because he was sick, and he woke me up at 6:30. Like, that's not a bad time to wake up. It's around the time I get up anyways. But this morning at 3:30 in the morning, 3:30. That's the time some people go to sleep. So I thought maybe you had like fallen asleep on the couch or something, and that you were getting up and you just woke the dog up or something. So I'm like, okay, fine, Spoon's fine. And then I hear my Aunt Renee from North Carolina. And these ladies are just yapping for no reason. I come down the stairs, the lights are on, Mom's just cozied up. Mariah's dog's on the couch. Pablo, little, and then who I love. And then Spoon is yapping at Mom, because when you don't realize, when Spoon wants to be a part of the conversation, always she starts barking. And I'm like, hair sticking straight up. Thank goodness I found shorts. So I wasn't just in my like underwear, And then I'm like, Mom, what is happening? And she goes, oh, say hi to your Aunt Renee. Say hi at 3:30 in the morning. Hang up the phone. And she goes, hey, Renee, I got to go. And I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? And I was going to take the dog out. And she's like, all right, took him out. And I'm like, so you're telling me the dog's just doing his own thing? And I put the dog back in the crate, put him in a different room as dark, and the dog goes right back to sleep. And I go upstairs and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I got to get out of this house.
Well, this is a great conversation about people are different.
People are so different. Well, with all that said, there was a lot of controversy about some of those clips. And I think the reality is that I say this to a lot of my friends. If you disagree with me, please tell me, because I would never want a relationship to end without us having a conversation. Because sometimes the pod is the pod. It's like, we just talk about certain things to just...
And sometimes we're just having fun, and it's a light conversation that doesn't... have deep meaning. We talk in the behind the scenes on, Beyonce winning with Calvin Carter, but does that really matter? It doesn't change, it doesn't change the world, doesn't affect my life. Those are just things we talk about because they're fun, they're interesting, and sometimes they have deep insight to what's happening in culture.
And the reason why I brought that up, because I agree with you absolutely, was that what I hated about the controversy in that clip was that people were making it about immigration. And what people don't know from that clip is that you're an immigrant, and that we have a lot of amazing immigrant friends and family, some who are legal, some who are illegal. And we've navigated that over the years. We've navigated our own opinions and beliefs and our relationships. And I think that one thing that I have learned, one of the many things I've learned from you, is that things are not so black and white, and things are nuanced. Right. And so I think there's a dynamic conversation to be had there that I want to have with you at some point. I want to do more research. I want to see how things play out before we address it. But from my personal platform, I've really just reached out to friends who feel called to protest.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of young people, a lot of my young Mexican friends who feel the call to protest in New York and LA. Hey, that's an American right. You have American right to protest peacefully, to have freedom of speech, and to have those beliefs platformed. And I fully support that. And if you agree or disagree with that, that is not for me to decide whether you're right or wrong. It's for me to decide whether I'm joining you or not.
Yes, I like
right?
that. Yeah.
And so I look at it and I go, okay, this is cool because I love when young people speak out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't always love what they're saying. I love when old people speak out. I don't always love what they're saying. So, with that being said, I applaud every person who's peacefully protesting and every person who feels like they have a great opinion and has thought through this and is continually learning and advancing their intellectual acumen in these moments.
And I just got to say, now that Donald Trump is president, I think we're going to have a lot of political things to talk about in the months and years ahead. So I don't know how to avoid the political domain and over the next few years because not because he's a Republican, but because he is so extreme in his applications. He moves fast in action. He's not anywhere near the middle in terms of the way he tries to execute. So he's just going to give us a lot of material to talk about. And in the same way, I think that there's going to be a lot of things to talk about because the Democratic Party is in a chapter in history where they have to reinvent themselves, rediscover themselves, and you're going to have conflicting and dynamic voices trying to help figure out how do you reshape the Democratic Party to find a message that resonates with the majority of Americans again. These are, to me, fascinating conversations. I mean, these issues are important, and we have to remember sometimes like political issues are the things we attach to a broader ideology. Usually parties have a deep, profound ideology, and then they look for the issues where they can win, not to execute those issues, but to advance their ideology. And then that's why sometimes for me I go, hey, you need to realize, even though you agree with this issue, and it makes you a Republican, or you agree with this issue, it makes you a Democrat, that you're also then agreeing with this ideology without even realizing it. And what's important is to step back and go, what's the larger view of reality that I'm advancing in human history because of this particular issue that I think is really important to me. And I think a lot of times both parties are incredibly manipulative in the way that they pick a policy that they can get a larger cluster of people without actually caring about that policy because they're trying to get enough people to get a majority to advance an ideology that they have.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. I think we can all be manipulated, and I think people are trying to manipulate us on every which way, from marketing to politics to spirituality, right? And this is like the tough thing of living in a consumer age and a consumer culture and a capitalistic society, that people are always trying to sell you something.
Yeah.
And so, talking about selling you something,
good transition.
No, transition to this. Like we got to be a part of something this last weekend with Brendan Bouchard
in Miami,
who's now become a really good friend of yours and a friend of ours.
Just a lovely, beautiful human being.
Incredibly energetic, amazing, generous, kind person. High performance coach, coaching coaches, but really at like one of the highest levels, like in that kind of like that 8 to 9 figure space where and so we went to his ultra event in Miami. He does 4 of these a year. He has like I think hundreds and hundreds of people a part of this 15K a year program. And a lot of these people are coaches or consultants and entrepreneurs who are basically data downloading all of his content and frameworks to then use them inside of their coaching spaces, which is really cool. One thing that I found really unique for me, though, is that we get to be a part of a thing that you and him do in LA. And it's called B, because we just took Brendan and we took Erwin and just said like B. And then we called it One Day at one point. Now I think it's just called like a B with Brendan and Erwin. And it's on March 7th in Los Angeles at Mosaic,
Mhm.
and it's an 8-hour day. It's like a 9 to 5
Yeah.
p.m. Basically, it's like 2 hours of Brendan, and then there's like a 30-minute break, and then an hour and a half of you doing unique content. It's all brand new content, which is really cool. And then there's a lunch break on campus. So you don't have to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And then the afternoon is you and Brandon doing a podcast, essentially conversation about what you guys talked about earlier in the day. So you're asking questions to him about his content. He's asking questions to you about your content. And then you open it up for a Q&A for like an hour. And that's really like the uncapped time. We kind of lose, it's like 3 p.m. to like maybe 4:30 or 5 p.m. And it's really, really cool. So like our arena members come, his ultra members come, and then we sell tickets, and you can go to erwinmcmanus.com and find that there. But really, we want to talk about the things that you spoke about.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you
Miami.
one funny thing. If you're dealing with,
I'll decide if it's funny.
the funny thing to me about profiling people is that when I met Brendan, my immediate thought was, oh, white guy. And then I meet his mom. His mom is this little
Half French, half Vietnamese.
fire hydrant of energy.
She's awesome.
And so I'm talking to someone who's so international. I mean, half French, half Vietnamese. And then Brenda goes, yeah, people have a hard time believing I'm 25% Vietnamese. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, I understand that, and he's tall and, a very Caucasian. And I realized people are so much more complex and dynamic than we ever imagined. And so that I thought was an interesting thing. But going to Brendan's event and watching him, I mean, one, I don't know anyone who brings the level of energy onto a stage that he brings. I mean, to the point of my discomfort, right? Because I'm more introverted than that environment it allows a person to be. And everybody's jumping and everybody's clapping and everybody's cheering. But I did realize something, and just from a dynamic perspective, like in this business event, which the teaching it has a lot of parallels to like even like church events, but they don't have worship. And when Brendan gets on stage and he is jumping and clapping and cheering and everybody's responding, that's actually like a form of that kind of worship experience.
It is.
And which I thought was really interesting because he fills that gap with that kind of energy, that kind of dynamic, and the room is just with him. And they were repeating declarations. So there, it has that kind of, that resonance. And then when he teaches, he's really masterful. I'm watching a craftsman really just move an audience in a direction that he so powerfully orchestrates. And he reminds them who they are. That's almost how we began. I can talk to this room differently than every other room because this is who you are. We can have deeper, more intense conversations because this is who you are. And that this is so interesting. He spends the first 20, 30 minutes building the room's identity, reminding them of who they are. And it's such a powerful human dynamic because so many of our insecurities and sense of inadequacy are rooted in the fact that we don't know who we are. Or we're convinced we're less than we are. Last night we were at Mariah's little birthday party. It was really beautiful. I'm in a conversation with one of your friends, and I just took a moment just kind of like to begin to speak into his life a little bit. And I said, I see a dissonance. Your eyes tell me you're sad. Your mouth tells me you're happy. And I think that you're emotionally in turmoil. And he goes, that is what's going on inside of me. And then he made the statement.
We haven't talked about this.
No, we haven't. He goes, I can't change what's going on inside of me. And I said, stop. You're going to have to rephrase that. You will change what's going on inside of you. And he goes, I will change what's going on inside of me. It's like, we don't even realize it. We tell ourselves so oftentimes who we are from the worst perspective of ourselves. And, so here we are at a birthday party, and, it's this coaching moment because it's somebody, we both profoundly love, and realizing that his internal narrative that he said out loud, most of the time we wouldn't stop a person. Most of the time we would just let it roll. But one of the things I've learned is, And it's ironic. I know this to do this for other people. You do this for me. When you hear me making a negative statement about myself, you stop me right away, and you awkwardly force me to reverse it to a positive statement. I think all of us need people in our lives that they listen to us. They hear the inner narrative that's leaking out, and then they challenge it and go, no, that's your struggle. That's not your identity. Never let your struggle be your identity. And one of the things I saw with Brendan was that he reclaims their identity as their highest version of themselves. And that's what every human being needs somewhere in their life. And this is a business event, right? This is a coaching, the highest level of people. And Brendan, I think, is the highest selling business coach in the world, hundreds of millions of dollars of training programs. And he begins in such a deeply human space of, let me tell you who you are. I want to remind you who you are.
Yeah. Yes.
And
yes.
then
I'm taking notes. Like that's because I had notes from the other session. I was adding notes to this. Like
then he slaps him.
Oh, so that
now that you know who you are.
I can't. No, but I love what you never let the struggle become your identity.
Yeah.
Never let the struggle become your identity. Never let the struggle become your identity. But I think that's literally the human condition. Mm-hmm. That is the human condition. We let the struggle become our identity. One thing I loved about Brendan's event was that it's for coaches, for business people. I don't know if he limits it at all, but like that's kind of probably where they aim the marketing for. We ran into an arena member, Dave Mitchell. That's like awesome. The first thing we did.
Yeah, cross-pollinating different spaces. That's awesome.
It was really cool. And what I love about Dave is he's such an evangelist for Brendan in our space, and then for you in Brendan's space. Yeah. And I love cross-pollination. I think it's one of the most unique things that can happen in the world. When we cross-pollinate ideas, we create new recipes and new like mechanisms and new chemicals and new ideas and new flavors and smells and aromas and new outcomes. But what I loved about Brendan's event was that it was for business people, but he immediately made it human. Yeah. You know, it was the same song. It was bright lights. It was in a hotel banquet space. Right? Like I would never put you in that space because for me, environment determines the way I feel. Yeah. And for you and Brendan, you never let the environment determine the way you feel or the outcome of the message. And that was the huge takeaway. I was like, no, what makes this awesome is Brendan and all these people. And now we're like watching like magic happen in a very spiritual way. Right? We're watching energy being ripped out of these individuals, collected together. Like the first thing he does is blast Imagine Dragons. Yeah. I don't even like that song, but he blasting house music and Imagine Dragons, and people are just talking. There's like 250 people in this one space because they limit it for their groups. They cap it at a certain space, and then you're allowed a few different events a year over 2 years. And I love that format. So he keeps it intimate, but he also makes it like enough where there's a great momentum and a great energy in the room. And he blasts music, and you can see the people who aren't believers. You can see the people who aren't quite sure. Believers not in like faith, but believers in like the framework, the process. And then he just brings energy. And the thing I loved is that he doesn't just bring energy and doesn't like address the fact that he's bringing a ton of energy. What he says is like immediately is behind what you don't see is that I'm shadow boxing and I'm skipping and I'm running the length because I'm getting my energy as high as I can so that when I platform myself, I might bring it down to here. But I'm going to bring as much of you up with me to meet me in this middle ground. And I found it really unique because he's like, and then right after he goes, Super Bowl hugs with the person next to you. You know, and in church, the church space that we come from, it's like, okay, take 90 seconds and politely introduce yourself to the person next to you. Like we become these like, for the sake of this joke, of like the airline stewards of church or spiritual spaces or organizational spaces or business spaces or boardrooms. And we just forget that when you make things human and you involve touch and you involve the exchange of energy, that really great, beautiful things happen. And so immediately he's like exciting people, bringing this conversation up, and then he merges the energy and the conversations together. And then he addresses them and brings them to him. They're paying attention and they're bought in. And then he immediately hits them with the challenge. Yeah.
What's interesting, I think I actually said hug 4 people with an ultra hug.
4 or 5 people.
And social psychologists have been saying that you need to have at least 4 hugs a day to have optimal mental health. Without those 4 hugs a day, your mental health actually begins to deteriorate. And, especially when you're single, you may not get a hug for 4 days.
Yeah.
Much less 4 hugs in a day. And what really struck me is that he solved that 4 hugs for that day in the first 15 minutes.
That's amazing.
So in that moment, the chemical compounds that are being emitted as people hug each other are elevating their mental health, which positions them to learn and grow at a deeper level. So the 4 hugs aren't simply space fillers. They're actually working on the internal world of every person in that room so they can receive and actualize what's going to be taught in the hours ahead.
So unique, man.
That's
I really was freaked out at Brendan's event. I was
Yeah,
fully freaked out.
Yeah, I'm like, can I skip that part? Because he says you're responsible for the energy you bring into the room.
Yeah.
And so my response to that was, I can't bring that level of energy, so I think I should just tap out and stay outside so I don't actually diminish the energy in the room. And because my energy is incredibly internal.
Yeah.
And on top of that, he had sent me a text asking me to speak, so I was going to speak. And
did he send you a text, or did he just ask you when we were backstage?
No, he sent me a text.
Oh, because you ran into him in the gym.
Yeah, it was
the day
funny.
Before.
I'm in the gym,
Yeah.
and I'm just starting to get back in the gym after 5 months of
yeah.
injury with this arm, and so I'm really valuing this time. And this guy starts walking across the gym. I did not recognize him at first, and 'cause I think I have a problem with facial recognition, and he's right in front of me. He goes, "Erwin," and then, thank goodness, it exploded in my head. It's Brendan. And he points his phone toward me. He goes, "You see, I'm telling you the truth. There's my face on his phone. He's listening to me on a podcast while he's working out on the other side of the room, then sees me working out, spends the next hour grilling me on questions about spirituality, faith, God, Jesus," which is really like fantastic. And then he sends me a text later. He goes, "Will you speak?"
Yeah.
And
that was that is absolutely not why we showed up. We showed up to learn.
I wasn't planning to speak.
No, we didn't even bring clothes for that. Like, that
No,
was the fun. We were
I had
just
to
showing
apologize for like the way I was dressed on that
up.
stage.
We had been traveling for a week in like Phoenix, New York, and then Miami, and 3 different climates, 3 different situations, and then we were not prepared for what was about to happen.
Yeah, but it was interesting even in that journey. Immediately I thought, okay, I'm going to teach them the 7 frequencies of communication. It's my newest book. It's what I've been thinking about. It's what I've been working on. But as I stood in the back and I talked to Karen, who runs Brendan's world, I said I could talk about this, and I said, or I could talk about this, or I could talk about this, or I could talk about this. And then she goes, no, that one, mind shift, mental structures. That's what this room needs. And I think sometimes, as communicators, it's more important to us that we say what we want to say rather than what the audience needs to hear. And I actually think that when you understand speaking or communicating as an act of service, it changes the way you think about those things. So when she said that, my little brain went, too bad. I'm not going to get to talk about this. But then it was like, okay, bring this at the highest level as you can. And then, what happens is, there was a traffic accident. He was late. Things were running behind. My time was getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter because, needing to stay on time. And he says, "Can you go for 30 minutes? And to me, the answer is always yes, because you're there to serve the whole. It's not about you, and for me, I deserve 0 minutes. So if I'm offered 30, I feel like that's a gift. But then for me, it becomes a challenge. How do I present the greatest 30 minutes possible? And I love those challenges. I mean, my career exploded when I was invited to fly across the country to give a 4-minute talk. And I think I write about this in one of the books, because the day I'm at the airport, there was a plane crash, and there was a massive storm, and my flight was delayed hours because of safety issues. And I keep seeing this insurance machine. I don't know whether to buy life insurance, because you're little boy, maybe a couple of years old, and I don't know if I'm going to die. And I'm going, do I really want to get on this plane and travel across the country for 4 minutes? And then when we landed, I think the event was in Vegas, our tire blew on the landing. So the plane's landing sideways.
Jeez.
Everything's flying out of the compartments. People are screaming. The masks are dropping. And all this, and in my mind, I'm going, 4 minutes. Is this worth 4 minutes? And when I gave those 4 minutes, they were probably, at that point in my life, the most powerful, significant, urgent 4 minutes I've ever given, because it had the context of life and death.
Wow.
And I remember when I got to minute 4, I didn't know this, but they showed me later, a guy wrote really fast, keep going. Like, you know, like they wanted me to keep going because those 4 minutes were poignant and impacting. But I never saw that because I was so focused on, you know, it's 3:46. I'm not looking at a sign right in front of me that said, keep going. I stopped right at 4 minutes. I got a standing ovation. And immediately this man offered me a job anywhere in the country I wanted to go. And that's how I ended up with the next phase of my career. And because of 4 minutes. And so if you take seriously whatever has been entrusted to you, and it's sometimes not about the minutes. You might be talking to one person. You might be making a presentation to 3 to 5 people. You might be in a room of 20 people or 50 people. If the only room that's important to you is the day you get in front of 20,000, you will never get in front of 20,000. I'm convinced that I was given audiences of 250,000 because I treated talking to one person with the same level of importance. And so it's both time and scale. And when you value the time, you go, if they give me 4 minutes, I'm going to make that the most important 4 minutes of my life. And if they put me in front of 4 people, I'm going to make those the most important 4 people in the world. And when you take on that posture, I actually think your life begins to scale and scale and scale.
It's so wonderful. Really wonderful. I think, you know, we talk a lot about being like, what does God entrust you with, or what is the world, or, you know, life just open these doors, these moments that happen that are presented to you in your journey in your life, and it's whether or not you have the courage and the willingness and the preparedness to show up and engage in those. And I think so many of us, me included, are on the other side where we live in more defined by the struggle versus maybe the other side of that. And you talked a lot about, you gave a mind shift talk. And what I love about Brendan is immediately when we got there, he's like asking for my number. He's texting, he's reaching out, he's asking, what would make this more valuable for you?
Asking us to pick a subject for him to talk about that day.
And Brendan, I think, is one of those guys who goes, he may not be planned always. Like there's nothing a plan for the event, right? There's skeleton and a structure, but he wasn't necessarily planned and limited to the plan in his content. He was prepared.
Yes.
And he was always looking, because he's so prepared, he can navigate and develop and evolve the message and the conversation to kind of adapt to what he feels the pulse in the room is. Yeah. And you're very similar in that. And what I love about Brendan, he was also familiar with your content. So when you were like, hey, how can I be of service? What is it best? What would be best for me to talk about? Is it the frequencies? Is it mind shift? Is it this? Is it that? And he goes, no, it's this. And he talked about, he's like, it's mind shift. It's I want you to talk about the pain in people's lives.
Yeah. And then, and there were moments, and it's really interesting because I know that content inside and out, and yet I was saying things I've never said.
And I have those notes.
And I was saying things in a way I've never said them. And that's the wonderful thing about using, I'm going to use the phrase old content.
Okay.
But not using it in its age. Like you can have old content that you make brand new in that moment. And if you're just using old content and it's still old, it's boring and lifeless. But if you have old content and you're making it new and alive and fresh, and it becomes dynamic and life-giving. And so I knew it was coming out new because I was seeing new things. And I was communicating things in a way I've never said them in new ways. And that was exciting for me going, oh. And so I was experiencing the talk with the room.
It's cool because there's a lot of things. I mean, there was you talk about this in the 5 elements of communication or art of calm world, which is now like in our arena space, in the classroom space of that, which is cool that like we've been building all these masterclass courses and then we just put them in our community. But you talk about this, like having that aha moment,
Mm-hmm.
that moment where the room literally just goes,
Yeah.
wow. And not wow about the way you presented it, but wow in that the idea and the concept and the messaging unlock something in them,
Yeah.
that it turns the light bulb.
Yeah.
And it was really cool because I've heard that talk.
Yeah.
It's mind shift.
Yeah.
And I've heard that in 15-minute increments, 5-minute increments. I've heard it in 30-minute. I've heard it in an hour long. I've heard it in podcast form. I've heard it in like our longer coursework. But for you to kind of dive into that 30 minutes and to break it down that way, you know, I when I hear the content I've heard before, I'm like, okay, he's in the archives. He's bringing out the vintage. And but I also know you. You are not someone. Your content is always evolving. And what I mean by that is that you are continually adding new nuances, because I believe a lot of your ideas are living and growing and organic, because you're not definitive in that way. You're definitive about specific things, things that matter and are important. But when it comes to unlocking the human imagination, the human creativity, the greatness inside of each of individual, the God-given purpose inside of people, that is something that is continually growing and thinking inside of your conceptual mind. And one thing that I love about what you do is that you will readdress things. And so you made this statement, and when you made this statement, the whole room just had this like breath of fresh air. And you talked about pain tells you you're at your limit when you're just at the beginning of your experience.
I think
pain tells you you're at your limit when you're just at the beginning of your experience. What do you think you said? Or what did you actually say?
The two things I remember saying is, until you experience pain,
that's the first one.
You're simply swimming in average.
Yeah.
And that was something I don't think I've ever said that way before. And then the other thing I said was, until you begin to step into your pain, you've not begun the journey into your greatness.
Yes, that was great. But this was the aha moment when you talked about pain tells you you're at your limit when you're just at the beginning of your experience.
Yeah, that's right.
That was the moment.
Oh, no, I hear that.
When everybody literally just stopped.
I said pain is a liar.
Yes.
And when pain is telling you you're at your limit, you're just at the beginning of your journey, beginning of your experience. Yeah, and in fact, afterwards, Brendan came and said, no one in America is addressing pain in this way. There's not a business consultant in the field who has your perspective on pain, and you need to get this out to every business in America.
And he literally cornered me afterwards in the back, and he just goes, okay, that was the perfect 30. Because that was the perfect 30. Tell me what you need. What do you need? I want to help you. I'm your friend. Tell me what you need, but I don't know how to help you. And I loved it. Like, Brandon's posture is always being at service to the person that's around him.
Yeah.
And like, you look at his success. His success is directly correlated to his ability to serve.
Yeah.
His success is directly correlated to his ability to look at the room and find the people that he cares about. And goes, I want to serve you, I want to bring more value, and I want to help you unlock whatever it is that that door you're trying to walk through. And he goes, Aaron, we're going to cut those clips up, and we are going to cold DM, cold call, cold email every corporation, organization, company, consultant, Accenture, whoever it is. We're going to go and knock on those doors and make them hire Erwin to go and speak to them. And it was just so cool. So if you're listening, just hit us up. Aaron at erwinmcmanus.com. That's my work email.
And I do think that pain is such an important issue because we have a culture of fragility. We have a culture that is stressed out, but it's not because there's more stress, but because we're less capable of handling stress. We have a culture where we move toward fragmentation and brokenness in early stages of the human experience. And in fact, one of the things I was sharing with someone last night was, whenever you experience anxiety and stress at the highest level, you have one of two choices. You can either decrease the amount of challenge you're trying to take on, or increase the amount of challenge you can take on. And so you have two choices. You can diminish your external challenge. I'm just going to do less, take on less. Or you can increase your internal capacity. I'm going to increase my ability to take on greater challenges, greater risks, greater difficulties.
I think we're going to time out there, because I think everybody who's listening to this podcast is going to hit that little button that goes 10 seconds back. And you probably have to hit it 2 or 3 times to get back to where you just started that statement, because I think they need to sit in that for a second and take those notes. So we're just going to give them a second to do that. Okay, now we're back. But I want to wrap the podcast. We're already almost 40 minutes into it because we did 10 minutes before this. But watching you in different rooms is really masterful. Because were you nervous?
No.
You felt comfortable.
You know why? Because I trusted Brendan to want me to succeed, just to be myself, and you know, that I didn't have any sense of awkwardness, of I don't fit into this moment. I did have in my mind at the beginning, how do I match his energy? It's just so intense and high. And immediately my other, you know, the devil and angel on my shoulder said, just be yourself. Like the best version of you is going to be exactly what this room needs. And one of the great gifts people can give you when they host events is to give you the confidence to be yourself. And I felt like Brendan actually gave me that gift. I just walked on stage and I was just me. And I think that's why, and I rarely do this. Kim texted me and said, how did it go? And I said, I think it was the best version of me.
It was awesome.
And she said, you never say that. And I go, I know, I don't.
I'm your biggest fan, right? And you asked me, I don't know if you asked me, but you asked me like, how did you think it went? And I was like, it was amazing. But it's easy to say it's amazing. It's harder to give feedback. So I always try to have like one or two things I can give a feedback point on. And like my only point of feedback was like, yeah, you told a lot of stories maybe. Like I literally had nothing to critique. It just was vulnerable, authentic. You brought the right energy. You hit his core values in a unique way because he kind of laid out the things that he cares about in frameworks and when coaching and conversations. And, you know, and I will say a part of it was his ability to create an environment and an ecosystem of leaned in, engaged leaders, learners, and entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But then you also stepped into that room going, I don't need to be Brendan. Brendan's Brendan. If I'm Brendan, then this becomes a competition.
It's redundant.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm Erwin.
Yeah.
And I love your approach because it was even less about you bringing the best you were like, let me offer the best me, and then let me engage with the best version of the audience in the room. And what I love about you is you have this ability where Brandon can bring it, I think, through energy and framework. You bring it through this self-awareness where it feels like you're turning on lights inside of people's like hearts and souls and minds, and whatever that thing is, there's deep, dark, painful places inside of all of us. And that's the uniqueness of Mindshift, because Mindshift has so much to do with the mental structures and the mental frameworks and the things that we say and the way we say them to ourselves, the way we listen and talk to ourselves. But really a lot of it is, what are we willing to shine a light on internally? And what are we willing to present and bring to the surface to go, this is the thing I'm not okay with, or this is the thing I need to work on, or this is the thing that I'm in so much pain, but it's so deep inside of me that it's actually withering away at the foundation of my life. And if I'm unwilling to address those things, I can never actually build on top of the space that I've been given. And it was fun to watch, and they gave you a standing ovation. And the way that Dave Mitchell expressed this in the arena call that we had this last week, because he asked a question in our like Q&A community call, and he just said, you know, Brendan creates a great environment. People stand up all the time. People gave you a standing ovation, and then they stayed standing. And he goes, and that's not what the community does, because they're not fake, they're not forced. You know, they honor, and then they stayed and they stood, and there was something there, because I think people who can stand in those moments, really, they've had this visceral reaction, and it was cool to watch. So anyways, thank you for letting me be a part of it.
Even that's such an interesting thing. When I almost never see standing ovations because I feel so awkward in that moment. I literally turn and walk off the stage. And I've been told in the past, did you see the standing ovation? I didn't.
You're like, no, I blacked out. Went down going down the stairs.
I just don't. It's like I feel naked, you know?
Yeah.
I said, I closed and I turned left, started walking off. I saw it because it's a small room. I saw everyone stand up, and I tried to ignore it, to avoid it. And Brendan was staying there, and he's like pointed, get back up there. That's why I went back on stage to the middle. And then I just kept standing and applauding, and I tried to get off, and Brendan's like, he wouldn't let me leave. He made me stand in their affirmation, and that's a very hard thing for me. And then he came up and asked me one question. as a follow-up. But I just realized even there, he had like an empathetic awareness to force me to experience people's appreciation, knowing, and I could tell he knew it wasn't comfortable for me and that I wouldn't naturally do that. And I'm really grateful for it, because I think I've missed enjoying that moment of celebration in my life because I'm so uncomfortable with it.
I don't think there's a better way to end this episode than with that statement. Thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Mind Shift podcast. Rate and review this podcast, subscribe on YouTube, share this with your friends, and let us know you're listening on Instagram. You also, we would love to invite you into the Mind Shift community, which is on an app called School. And the way you can access that is you can go to the Instagram, you can click the link in bio, and I think it's the third option, or you can go to mindshiftpod.com. And there's an option to join the community. It's $25 a month. You can try a free trial for 7 days. I encourage you to do that, because February 11th, we are doing a conversation, a community call, where we create an episode with our community where they just ask questions and we answer them together. And it's pretty fun. We do it 5 p.m. On a different weeknight throughout the month. And February 11th is the next one, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And it's really amazing. People are tuning in from all over the world to join the community, to have deeper conversations, and ultimately make a mind shift. So thank you, Dad. This was a great episode, and I will see you next week.
Yeah, I love you.